Hello, everybody. Good evening. Buenas noches, buenos dias, buenas tardes, depending where you are in the world. I am coming to you live from Mexico City, Mexico, a place I have called home for 5 of the last 8 years. Um, if you are new here and you're like, what is this video that YouTube has served to me? Welcome. My name is Adelia Abora Sade. I'm a financial coach. I am co-founder, co-host of Reclaim the Retreat, and this is my YouTube channel. It is a space where I work to demystify travel and money and everything in between. And so tonight, hoping to demystify a little bit debt payoff. Uh, I see those of you that are here live. I wasn't sure if anybody was going to show up because I haven't been here for a minute because life has been lifing. And I don't think I made a post about tonight's live. So the fact that you're here means a lot to me. Say hello in the chat. I see you have, as just reminded me. Welcome everybody to the Picky Girl Nation. Um, so tonight I want to talk about debt and the things that you should and shouldn't do, or things you need to consider when you are planning to eliminate debt. Um, those of you who are watching, and myself included, who are US Americans, have a relationship with debt I don't think we find in many other parts of the world. For us US Americans, carrying a certain amount of debt is considered the norm. I would probably venture to say that people who have absolutely no debt, adults who have no debt, are probably the exception, like in their friend group. Carrying debt is almost seems to be the American way. We are all pushed to pursue the American dream, and often the only way to pursue those things is by taking on debt. Um, now, I'm not asking anybody to tell on themselves. I did a little Googling. These numbers, what y'all are looking at right now, this is from a debt study that Experian did and published very, very recently. So these numbers are pretty good. The average person, the average American has about $90,460 in debt. Now, what you're looking at right now is a breakdown by age cohort. And I don't know about y'all, but it's not, I'm seeing that Gen X has the most debt does not shock me. I don't know about y'all. Um, the baby boomers and silent generation, in the last couple of years, we've seen their amount of debt drop, which makes sense if you think about people paying off homes, moving into retirement, that sort of thing. Think about the stage of life that they're in. But the younger generations, we're actually seeing increases in the amount of debt that they have. There was something I was going to say, but I forgot. Okay. So I know what I was going to say. What is all of this debt? These numbers you're looking at, like the average 18 to 23-year-old has about $10,000 in debt. What is that made up of? For those of us that are Gen X, when we're talking about 135, almost $136,000 of debt, where is that coming from? Primarily, um, in this study that they did, this is including all debt. This is including all types of consumer debt products, credit cards, personal loans, student loans, and mortgages. Now, it gets a little bit more interesting if we specifically look at, consumer debt, things like credit card. But I think it is interesting to see uh, how much debt the average person is carrying. Um, I also want to share this one with y'all, which I can't see too well on my screen because I don't have on my glasses. Okay, so this is, we're breaking down the different types of debt. Now, we've got mortgage debt. That's the loan you take out to purchase a home. HELOCs, those are um, those are lined home equity lines of credit. So somebody could conceivably have a mortgage, but then also take out a HELOC on top of that. Student loan debt, auto loan debt, credit card, retail cards, which I guess they're separating out from ones like Visa, MasterCard, and personal loans. So what I think is important to see here is what has been happening. What is the pattern we see over the last few years? And I don't think it's necessarily a good thing that we are seeing increases in the amount of debt that people are having to take on. Um, I doubt that's good, especially given what we know about wages and things like that. Okay, so most people we know has debt. Most people have more debt than they could easily pay off. Now, when we first started talking, I mentioned that carrying debt seems to be a very American thing. Um, I don't know if y'all follow Our Black Utopia. If you don't, you should. Halisi and Rick. And Halisi always talks about the fact that, what was it, like 5 years ago? I think it was 5 years ago. Maybe it was more than that. When she and Rick got their wake up call about their financial situation, she was of the mind that they were doing great. They paid their bills on time. And for a lot of us, that's the messaging we got growing up when it came to uh, loans, credit cards, things like that. It's like you need to make sure you make the payment. And so a lot of us see credit cards in particular as something you just are going to continually carry a balance on. And what's important is, are you paying the minimum payment? Are you paying on time? And I am not trying to say that those are not important things, but simply paying the minimum payment on time every month is not going to get you to eliminate that debt. All right. Now, uh, in particular, like if there's a kind of debt that I got beef with, there's two kinds: student loan debt, that's a separate thing, and credit card debt. I think it is really interesting for us to look at because it's often we have tunnel vision when it comes to finances. We know, I hope we know what's happening in our own situation, and it can often feel like you're doing okay. Because I don't know a lot of people who talk about casually with each other, like, girl, yeah, I'm carrying 300 grand of credit card debt. Like, we don't know that about other people, which is why I always like to look at these numbers so that you can personally think about your situation and kind of see where you are. Are you an outlier? Are you doing better than most? Are you doing worse than most? Are you fitting the general trend here? And again, we see what's happening at the bigger picture with increases in debt. We're seeing more and more credit card debt. Um, and you see if you look at just the far right column, the change between 2022 and 2023, you'll notice that credit card debt is growing the most for millennials, followed by Gen X. I really don't like the idea of young people having to take on increasing amounts of debt. Like that's not a good sign. That's not a good sign. Um, so what I want to talk to y'all about, I didn't come here tonight just to bring everybody down with lots of depressing numbers. Okay. We see that lots of US Americans have debt. A lot of them have a variety of debt, in particular credit card debt. Now, why is that? Why are we so different than so many other countries? You know, one of the things that we talk about here on this channel is moving abroad. I moved abroad and I left the United States in 2016. And the first country I moved to was Honduras. And I don't know if credit cards were a thing there. The really, really wealthy probably have them, but like the average person, if they don't have the money to pay for something, they're not putting it on a credit card. I left Honduras, I moved to Mexico. Mexico is another place where cash is king. Um, being and let me say that's different than my ability as someone who has credit cards to be able to pay for things with credit cards. That's one thing. But another thing is a society that really is about people paying for stuff with cash. In places like Honduras and Mexico, where I live now, you'll often notice that when people are building a home, they build what they can finance in the moment. And so you'll see partially constructed houses. That is not unusual. A lot of foreigners will often ask me about purchasing property here in Mexico. And when my response is, and because they want to know, like, oh, do they have mortgages? That's a fairly new concept. Uh, a lot of folks, it is expected that if you're going to buy a property, you got the cash. And if you don't have the cash, if you can get a mortgage, in Mexico, in particular, you're expected to put something like 30, 40% down, and it's not a 30-year term. I lived in Kuwait, and Kuwait, Qatar, UAE, the Middle Eastern countries do not play about debt. There were always stories of foreigners who had, they were making the big bucks at their job. My job did not pay big bucks, but they were making big bucks at their job. You know, got credit cards, took out loans, and then when their time and their employment came to an end in the Middle East, they were trying to leave, and the government of the country, the banks were like, no, you can't leave. And that sounds wild to those of us from the United States, where having debt, maybe you pay it back, maybe you don't. Like that's just an average everyday thing of life. And in a lot of the Middle Eastern countries, if you have debt, you can't leave because they want to know that they're going to get their money. And so I lived in China before I moved back to Mexico. And you're talking about it's a cash society, but not paper money. Everything was through WeChat and Alipay. Like you could not go into a store and pay with a credit card. That was virtually impossible. Either you paid cash or you did WeChat and Alipay were kind of like Google Pay, Apple Pay, except it was connected directly to your bank account, not to a credit card. So I feel like the US is this particular place where we treat debt very differently than the rest of the world. I've talked to people in Europe and they talk when I talk about like applying for a credit card, most Europeans who are paying with card, they're paying with a debit card. So we are in a unique situation. Libria said they're expected to pay 50% down to buy a house. For us, US Americans, that's like flabbergasting. We can't imagine it. So our experience is different. Now, why is it that we go into this debt? Why are we carrying that debt? There are a variety of reasons. Um, you know, I will start with, and I'm sure y'all have heard people talk about this, there being like good debt and bad debt. I don't really like to characterize it in that terms because there's this sort of like judgment implied, like, oh girl, you got all that bad debt. And I'm not about that. However, I will classify, there is consumer debt, there is debt that can work to improve your earning capabilities. There's debt that can improve um, your net worth. So, like taking out a mortgage, I don't think anybody should be shamed for carrying mortgage debt because you are buying yourself a place to live, which is what real estate is supposed to be for. But also, that's an asset that could likely increase in value. And when you decide to sell, you can get more than you paid for it. So, you know, all of that to say that all debt is not created equal. So, why are Americans in debt? Well, you want to buy a house. Now, I have not lived in the United States for a hot second, but I catch the news every now and then, and I have seen that housing prices are not what they used to be. So, coming up with 50% down, paying cash for a house, that's hard to do. Okay. Um, and so that's a reason you would have debt, buying a car. There are those things. Trying to get an education and you come from a family that doesn't have money when education costs have skyrocketed, student loan debt. So it's not like not like the only way we're acquiring all of this debt is that we're out there um, just spending recklessly. It's not that. The vast majority of it seems to be people are just trying to live life and trying to get the American dream. And that's not anything somebody should be shamed for. Now, you add into it, I think this explains why we're seeing the debt rates increase. You add into it stagnant wages. You add into it corporate greed. All of that combines to have people finding it necessary to take on more and more debt. I love this, Libria. Leverage, because that's what they call it. They don't call it debt, they call it leverage. All right. So, what I want to talk about tonight was paying it off. Now, why should you try to pay off your debt? Why should that be a goal? Well, there is the ongoing cost of interest. Having debt is not free. And I say that because there might be somebody watching this, like my adult child, who it never clicked, despite me being her mama. It never clicked to her that the goal was not to have a credit card bill, and that when she would only pay a little bit every month, that they were charging her interest. Somehow, through all the conversations I had with her, that never clicked in her head. So having a loan, whether it's a mortgage loan, whether it's a credit card, and credit cards are loans, they are charging you. They're not lending you that money out of the kindness of their heart. They are charging you. And so to eliminate that fee that they're charging you every month, paying off your debt can eliminate that. And we'll talk a little bit about, like, should you be working toward paying off all debt? We'll talk about that in a sec. But another reason to pay it off is that carrying the debt limits your financial options. It limits your options. If you happen to find my channel because you want to live abroad, because you want to retire early, because you want to do whatever, you want to take off a year and travel the world, having to make debt payments while trying to do any of those things makes doing those things that much more difficult. And so if you don't have the weight of these debt payments weighing on you, you are free to more easily pursue whatever it is that you want to pursue, be that living abroad, retiring early, taking a sabbatical, traveling the world, what have you. Okay. Now, I can't talk about paying off debts and not say a little something about paying off old debts. Okay. Now, there are lots of financial folks on the internet that will tell you that debt is bad, debt is wrong, all of that. I am not one of those people. What I like people to do is to be strategic about the debt that they have and have a plan for eventually paying it off. Now, when our conversation tonight talks about, like, what you should do when you're paying off debt, I'm talking specifically about, like, current active debts. But if you've got some old debt, there were some credit cards that got charged off, there was some old medical debt, maybe you paid for your boyfriend to get a set of rims and he was supposed to pay you back and put it on your credit card, but he never did. That kind of stuff, like old stuff. Am I saying that you should be working toward paying off that old stuff? Not necessarily. Okay. First question, one of the do's, I guess, about paying off debt is figure out, have you already been dinged for that debt? All right, think about the way the system works in the United States. You take out a loan, to buy a car, you charge things on a credit card, they loan you the money, or what have you. And if you don't pay it back, what do they do? If it is, like an auto loan, they'll repossess the car. And, what the value of the car is minus what you owe, that's what you still owe. But like those clothes you bought at Nordstrom's on your Amex is not going to show up at your house to repossess those clothes, right? So they've got to punish you in some way. And one way they do that is by putting it on your credit card, on your credit report, reporting you to the credit agencies for late payment, no payment. You take a ding to your credit score, right? Okay, so that's the first thing. And then I would also ask, well, okay, I see your question here. Libria, not this question. By old debt, do you mean collections? Quite possibly. It might be collections. It might not have been sent to collections yet. Well, yes, collections or something that's been charged off, which Yeah, I guess that would be considered collections as well. So yes, that's what I mean. I don't mean like a card that you are actively using. I'm saying something that's like, I ain't paid for that. Uh, this could also this could also include student debt. I used to be married to a man that took out some student loans, and then when he stopped going to school, the people asked for their money, and he was like, I ain't got y'all money, I'm not gonna pay. And so they started to garnish his wages, but he was like, whatever, I'm not gonna deal with that. So that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. But primarily, yes, collections. Um, and that's just it. They've already dinged you for that. Because here's the thing. In the US, our system, the levels of performance we're supposed to aim for are very much tied to sort of like this puritanical view, and having debt, not leverage, is considered to be a bad thing, and not paying your bills, you're a horrible person. You know what I'm saying? And so the way the system is set up, if you don't pay this debt you owe, there are things in place to punish you. And they punish you by putting it on your credit report. They punish you by, I'm gonna turn this fan on. I hope it's not too loud because I am hot. They punish you by lowering your credit score and all of that. So to me, it's kind of, the exchange has happened there. You were supposed to pay it, you didn't, they punished you. After they've already dinged you, do you still have to go pay them? I don't know. Do you feel like you have to? Now, something else to consider is, and ask yourself, what is the statute of limitations on those old debts? Um, because if your desire to handle this old debt is coming from a place of, I don't want them to sue me, well, if the statute of limitations is already expired, they can't sue you for it. So that is something to consider. And I mentioned this could apply to student loan debt. I'm talking about private student loans, not federal student loans. In every state, there is a statute of limitation for debt. Some states break it down by the kind of debt, and some states are very specific about educational. So if the statute of limitations has already expired, they've already dinged up your credit, what do you gain by paying off that debt that has probably been sold off for pennies on the dollar? I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying that's something you should think about. And something you should be very careful about is restarting the clock on an old debt. Because I know some people, they get where they want to, they're like, I'm gonna fix it all. I'm gonna pay what I owe. I'm gonna do right. I'm gonna follow through. That is great. However, because these other things are in place, I would really hate to see you restarting the clock on a debt that was on its way out. Remember that bad things on your credit fall off after 7 years. So for 7 years, you pay the price of not having paid that debt. Why restart that clock? So you can suffer some more? So that's something that you should think about. That's all I'm saying. Okay. Now, um, questions you should ask yourself before eliminating a debt. And these are the active ones, not the old debts, not the things that went to collection. No. Okay. Active debts that you have. Questions you should ask yourself. Okay. First of all, sit down, make a list of the debts you believe you have, and what is the source of that debt? Because all debt is not created equal. Like, particularly, I'm thinking about mortgages and student loans. You can tell I'm not a big fan of student loans or repaying them, honestly. Um, some people get on this kick about, I want to be debt free and I don't want to even pay. I want to eliminate my mortgage too. Well, that might not be the best idea from a financial point of view. It might not be. So that is something to consider. Like when you think about the total amount that you owe, how much of that is credit cards? How much of that is mortgage? How much of it is cars? That kind of thing. Okay. With student loans, depending on your situation, would you qualify for some kind of loan forgiveness program? Those of you, a lot of you is, I lost my train of thought there. A lot of you are here because you are considering a move abroad. And some folks are like, I need to eliminate my debt before I move abroad. Well, with your credit card debt, I would agree with you. Eliminate that before you move abroad. Your student loan debt, maybe not. I've talked about this numerous times on this channel, but if you are going to be outside of the US, and I said this in another video and somebody just made a comment on it. Some people use moving abroad as a way to eliminate their student debt. Because let's say you have a job abroad, like the jobs I had abroad, they paid for my housing. That freed up a chunk of my income that didn't have to go to that, right? So some people get a job abroad, that part of their package, they're not having to pay for housing, they're not having to pay for transportation, and instead of spending that money there, they funnel it toward repaying their student loans. There is nothing wrong with that. That is a valid plan, okay? But if you are someone that doesn't feel you particularly moved to repay the federal government, moving abroad could be a way where you don't have to do that. I've mentioned the foreign earned income exclusion, the FEIE. If you are living outside of the US, you can exclude in excess of $120,000 of income and from federal income taxes. And from income tax purposes, your income becomes zero. And if you're on a plan to repay your student loans where your payment is based off of your income, zero income means zero loan payment. I know several folks who will not return to live in the US until they've had their loans forgiven through one of those programs, where, because as long as they're outside the US, they can keep their income at zero using the FEIE. So I don't know necessarily that paying off a student loan, unless it is something that you're moved to do, then go do it. But it's not like a mandatory thing. There are other options. So consider the source of the loan. Mortgages, you have to ask yourself financially, am the return I'm going to get on paying off my mortgage early, is it more than if I invested that money I was going to use to pay off the mortgage somewhere else? So just having no debt is not necessarily the goal. Some debt we can work with. Now, interest rates. This kind of flows into the whole mortgage situation. When I have clients and they're talking about, well, I'm thinking about paying off my mortgage early, my first question to them is always, well, what is the interest rate on your mortgage? If you're one of those lucky, fortunate people who got a 2% interest rate on their mortgage. It makes no sense to pay that mortgage off early. If you're like, but I got all of this money sitting here doing nothing, take that extra money. Because here's the thing. If you've got a chunk of money, or you're just going to plow that extra paycheck a month toward your mortgage, by paying off a mortgage with a 2% interest rate early, you are getting a 2% return on your investment. Baby, high yield savings accounts are paying more than 2% interest. So if you're trying to decide, should I pay off this mortgage early? What is the interest rate? Could you earn a greater return somewhere else? It doesn't have, because I know I start talking about investing in the stock market and people get very nervous. They get like, oh no, that's too risky. I don't want to lose all my money. The way things are right now, if you have a 2% mortgage, you can plop that money in a Ally high yield savings account and still have a better return than you would paying off that mortgage. Now, if you don't have any other debt, the only debt you have is your mortgage, and you're like, I hate sending Countrywide. I don't even know if Countrywide is still in business. I hate sending Wells Fargo that check every month. By all means, knock yourself out. Okay. But now, if your mortgage rate was, let's say, 15%, well, it might make more sense to pay it off. Okay. So what's the source of the debt? What is the interest rate? Particularly, I'm asking this question, or I'm posing it, because a lot of folks with credit cards don't know their interest rate. And I think when you dig a little and you find out what it is, you will be mortified. I remember the days of credit card interest rates being like 8%, maybe a high of 10. And now they're like 25, 29, 32% interest. Okay. So that's what that is costing you every month to carry that balance. Okay. So you cannot make it, I don't think you should make a decision to pay down debt without knowing your interest rates for every source of debt that you have. Okay. I think you also, okay, we covered that. Okay, I opened a new credit card not long ago, and I had no idea what interest rates were. When I saw the rates they were offering, I was like, "What the hell is this?" I'd been out the game for a minute, mortified at what they're charging for interest rate, and just on the principle alone, I don't want to pay Visa, Mastercard, Amex, none of them that kind of money. Um, All right. So what's the source of the debt? What are your interest rates? Okay. The other thing, the next question you need to ask is, what are the terms of this particular loan? Some loans have prepayment penalties. And I'm talking about some mortgages do, some personal loans do. If you have a HELOC, what have you. Don't make any assumptions. Find out, what are the terms. Are there prepayment penalties? How are they calculating interest? One of the things that make US student loans so horrible is the way that they calculate interest. When you look at, oh, I'm going to send them an extra $100 or whatever a month, and then you realize that your normal student loan payment isn't even taking care of all of the interest because of the way they calculate it. So that's something to know. Okay. And then the next question that you need to ask yourself is, you need to ask yourself this about yourself. Now that you've decided that you want to tackle paying off these debts, what is going to keep you motivated to do that? Are you somebody that needs a periodic success or win to keep you? So like, you know, you would get fulfillment from, okay, this card is completely paid off, it's done. Now I can tackle the next one. Are you somebody that needs that? Or are you somebody that's like, no, I want to go after the debt that is costing me the most money. That would be the one with the highest interest rate. I need to pay that off because I know I am now paying less. So you've got to do a little bit of personal examination. Like, what's going to keep you invested in this so that you can see it through? Because a lot of folks will ask, well, should I do a debt snowball? Should I do an avalanche? It depends on the kind of person you are. And so some people, and the difference, debt snowball is I pay off the lowest loan first. Once that's paid off, I then take the money I was paying that and I go to the next highest one. So I'm making some progress. I'm having periodic wins. Some people are like, no, I want to make the most impact financially. So which of these loans is costing me the most money? That's going to be directly related to the interest rate. Okay, it might take me, or the biggest loan I have, it might take me longer to pay that off, but I know that I'm saving interest the more money I put toward it. There are fewer periodic wins if you choose that option. And one is not better than the other. What's important is choosing a strategy that is going to keep you motivated. Does that mean that, like a lot of people do debt tracking sheets, like payoff, where they make like the little thermometer with the goal amount that they're trying to eliminate, and updating that every day, every week, every month helps them stay focused? There is no one system, but the best system is going to be the one that keeps you invested. Another question that you should ask yourself, because maybe after you sit down and you've listed the sources of all of your debt, you've looked at the balances, how much you owe, all of that, you feel like it's impossible. Like, you look at what the money you make, you look at this debt, and you're like, I don't know how I can pay this debt off and still eat and not be paying it off for 27 years. The question to ask yourself then is, would filing bankruptcy make sense for you here? And I know saying that, some folks probably clutch their pearls and gasp, because we've made bank, and I say we, I'm not talking about you and me, I'm talking about the system. We've made filing personal bankruptcy for regular people such a horrible thing. But there are lots of millionaires, billionaires who've done it and continue to do it. That's like part of their wealth strategy. The we put a lot of individual shame, and I think people assume if I file for personal bankruptcy, it is the end of the world. It is not. However, it might be the thing that maintains your mental health, and gives you a fresh slate to start over with. And so that is something to consider. That is a question to ask yourself. Um, so, I'm glad you mentioned this, Kimmy, because I forgot to mention it, because credit card rates are often variable. But y'all remember 2008, 2009, when people had those very adjustable rate mortgages? Um, that's something else. When you're looking at your interest rates, is it a variable rate? Is it an adjustable rate? That's something to consider as well, because that is going to make the difference. Heard on a real estate podcast with a woman who filed bankruptcy after 5 years later, had over 800 credit score, and has now close to half a million in real estate assets. That's the thing. Bankruptcy is not the end of the world. It is now. I am not trying to make light of the consequences that come with it. There will be some dings on your credit report. Your credit score will go down. It will be hard to get credit in the immediate aftermath. But if you are looking at a mountain of debt that is going to like damage your well-being, I'm never gonna tell you, girl, thug it out and pay those loans. No, this might be the way, take the lessons learned with you, but it is definitely not the end of the world. Definitely not. All right. And I am not an expert on bankruptcy. I do want somebody to come on the channel. So if there is somebody happen to watching this, I am looking for somebody to come on the channel to talk about it, because I think it's one of those things that people assume is horrible and bad, but people don't really know the details and the ins and outs of it. And so I want us to get educated. Okay, Tracy, I filed over 12 years ago. Best thing I did for myself. Net worth is higher, credit is so much better. In our culture, you get praised for suffering in many, many ways. And so this idea that like you took on these debts and you suffer to pay them back, like somehow you're gonna get bonus points for that? No, no. And what that does, remember we had a live on this channel where we talked about stress and how bad stress is for your health. Being stressed out about this mountain of debt that you have no way of paying back, that can't be good. And so if there is an option that alleviates that stress from your life, I'm all from it. I'm all for it. Okay. All right. So is there something I missed where y'all think something you need to think about or consider when paying off debt? I will be transparent. Part of the reason I was able to take a 65% pay cut when I left the United States was because I did not have any consumer debt. So the little bit of money I made while I lived in Honduras, I didn't have to try and figure out, okay, how can I live on this here in Honduras and pay these bills back home? I didn't have to do that. Eliminating consumer debt also freed me up to be able to increase my savings rate, so that I hit fire when I was 45 and I'm, quote unquote, retired now. So that's one of the reasons why I want us to like get out from under this. Federal student loans, for the most part, cannot be charged off uh, during bankruptcy. There are a few situations, but for the vast majority of people, they can't be, which is bogus as hell. Let's just call it what it is. It's bogus as hell. All right, 401k loans. Are we asking about should we, or we're talking about paying them off? Here's the thing. Um, when you take out a loan against a 401k, you are loaning yourself that money, but the cost of that loan is not just the interest that you are paying back to yourself. It is that money is no longer invested. particularly if you had to cash out investments that potentially could have kept growing. So there's a opportunity cost there. There is the cost in lost earnings while that money is not in your account. So one thing I will say, because I'm not a fan of a 401k loan unless, I mean, it's got to, for me personally, it would have to be really, really dire straits for me to take out a loan. In my head, I try to behave as if that money does not exist. And I realize sometimes life be life, and there are times when the money that don't exist, you still got to tap into that. I get it. But if at all you could avoid taking out that loan, because I know it is tempting, because we're thinking about, well, if I go to the credit union, I go to Bank of America and I take out a loan from them, this is what they're going to charge me in interest. But if I take out the 401k loan, I'm only paying this in interest. That is true, but you're the holder of the loan. You're not earning as much, and probably the interest that you are paying on that loan is not comparable to what you would be earning on the investment. So to me, with 401k loans, the cost is actually amplified. It is more than just the interest rate. So, I mean, it has to be dire for me to be like, yep, taking out that 401k loan, that is the way to go. Not a fan of that. Yay, Tamara. Thanks to this channel, my determination in the universe, I became debt-free as of August 30th. I wanted to be financially free and at some point job-free. I'm 54, 55 in October. Congratulations. Congratulations. So that's all I got for y'all for tonight. I will be live again on Friday. I have an interview. And so I hope y'all can join me then. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If there is somebody in your life who you think could benefit from the conversation here tonight, please share this video with them. And I will see y'all on Friday. Bye, guys.